Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take some of the most cited, complex, and sometimes really frustrating research, and we distill it down into the core insights you need to navigate your world.
And today we are undertaking a deep dive into maybe the most familiar and yet the most mysterious territory of all.
Ourselves.
Ourselves, exactly. We're exploring why self-knowledge is so notoriously difficult, and we're drawing heavily from the work of David Dunning, who is just a foundational figure in psychological science.
That's right. And if you know Dunning, you probably know the Dunning-Kruger effect. But the material we're really digging into today comes from his broader work, including his book, Self-Insight. And this book, it expands so far beyond just, the incompetent being overconfident. It asks a much more fundamental question. Why, even if we are highly intelligent, does our evaluation of our own abilities and our own character so often deviates, sometimes wildly, from objective reality?
It's the perennial human problem, isn't it? I mean, think about the ancient Greek mandate from the oracle at Delphi, know thyself. The philosopher Thales lamented centuries ago that knowing oneself was one of the most difficult things a human could do. And modern psychology, well, it confirms this difficulty is kind of baked into our cognition.
And we are not just talking about some, abstract philosophy. This difficulty has really severe real-world consequences. We often use the analogy of climbing Mount Everest, Sagarmatha, the goddess of the sky.
It is the ultimate test of self-assessment. To succeed and survive up there, you have to have accurate self-knowledge. You have to know your physical limits, your technical skill, your willpower.
But the reality is just tragic.
It is. The fatality rate for Everest climbers has hovered around 10%, and that persistent rate is often a direct result of inaccurate self-insight. People go too high, they go too fast, because they just fundamentally misjudge their own capability.
That context alone is so humbling. And the data Dunning uses is, it's just as stark. When psychologists measure how correlated our confidence in something is with our actual competence, the numbers are just shockingly low.
Unbelievably low. Dunning notes that for a lot of common social skills, like, say, our ability to detect lies, the correlation between how confident people feel and how competent they actually are can be as low as 0.04.
0.04.
Yeah. That means your self-image and reality are barely connected at all. It's like throwing a dart with your eyes closed.
Okay, so let's unpack this monumental gap. If our self-judgment is so unreliable, why are we all so confident? And this brings us straight to the foundational idea, right? The dual burden of incompetence.
This is the genius of the Dunning-Kruger insight. The difficulty for a low performer is that they carry a dual burden of failure. The skills you need to perform a task successfully are the very same skills you need to evaluate that performance.
Okay, give us the classic example of the essay again. I think it makes the concept immediately crystal clear.
Right. So imagine you're tasked with writing an excellent academic paper. To do that, you need logic, you need clarity, you need structural coherence.
The
basics. But those are also the precise criteria, the standard. You need to judge whether a paper is good or bad. So if you lack the skill to build a logical argument in the first place, you automatically lack the metacognitive ability to recognize that your own argument is fundamentally flawed.
So the very nature of their incompetence renders them blind to it. It's a completely closed feedback loop.
Precisely. In the initial studies, participants who scored in the bottom quartile on tests of humor or grammar or logic, they often estimated their performance to be around the 60th percentile.
Pick above average.
Well above average, almost as high as the most competent students. They genuinely believe they're succeeding. Dunning uses this powerful medical concept, anosognosia.
Where brain-damaged patients are unaware of their own paralysis.
Exactly, but he applies it to cognitive flaws. They aren't lying. They simply cannot perceive their own deficit.
Okay, but what's truly fascinating is that the highest performers don't escape this trap either. They just fall into a totally different pit, what we call the curse of competence.
That's right. The highly skilled, they often drastically underestimate their own performance relative to the group. They suffer from what's called the false consensus effect. They look at their own vast, complex knowledge and they just assume.
This is easy for me, so it must be easy for everyone.
Exactly. If I know this, everyone must know this.
Wait, so the error for the competent person isn't really about knowing themselves better. It's about knowing the general population worse.
Absolutely. They accurately gauge their own capability, but they completely misjudge the baseline of what's normal or average. They think their skill level is common, so they underestimate how truly unique or, superior their performance really is.
So this moves beyond just skill assessment Dunning shows these biases leak heavily into how we see our character, how we predict our lives. Let's talk about the illusions of character, maybe starting with the controllability bias.
This is a powerful one. It really shows how our self-serving optimism kicks in. We tend to overestimate our positive traits and our unique, successful life outcomes, but specifically when those outcomes are perceived as controllable.
Controllable by effort or discipline.
Exactly. We just assume we'll try harder than the average person.
Right.
People consistently believe they are far more likely to avoid things like divorce or being fired from their first job or getting into a car crash because these things feel like you can control them. But then they show much less optimism about avoiding things they can't control.
Like being struck by lightning.
Or getting the flu, yeah. We have this inflated faith in our ability to just exert the necessary control.
And this belief in our own unique effort, it leads directly to the observability trap, right? We feel uniquely anxious or uniquely complex, which makes us assume everyone else has it all figured out.
That's the consequence, yeah. We focus on traits that are internal and hidden, only observable by us, our deepest self-doubt, our private anxieties,
The messy stuff inside.
all the chaos. And we feel unique because we can feel it so intensely. This is what fuels the famous Barnum effect, where these vague statements like, you have considerable unused potential, feel uniquely accurate.
Even though they're true for everyone.
For every single person. And because we're so focused on our own messy internal landscape, we assume our peers must be more composed, more straightforward, more confident than they actually are.
And that leads straight to pluralistic ignorance.
It does. I mean, think about that complicated meeting or class where the expert used all this confusing jargon. You were confused, right? But you were too embarrassed to speak up.
Oh, I know this feeling all too well.
And since nobody else spoke up, you assume their silence meant they all understood everything perfectly.
When in reality,
everyone was experiencing the exact same unique feeling of confusion and embarrassment. And the result is this collective, totally false understanding of the group's competence.
wow, that phenomenon hits close to home for anyone who's ever sat through a staff meeting and just nodded along. But this raises the big question. If these biases are so persistent, why doesn't life experience, the greatest teacher, why doesn't it eventually correct them?
That is the real dilemma Dunning tackles in the second half of his work. Why experience doesn't always bring wisdom. And, well, the short answer is that real-world feedback is often fundamentally unreliable.
Right.
He isolates, I think, 4 factors that sabotage our ability to learn from what happens to us.
So let's start with the first one. How is feedback probabilistic? What does that mean?
It just means that correct choices don't guarantee rewards, and sometimes bad choices get lucky. Think of a good salesperson who usually smiles to close a deal, but on Tuesday, that smile actually drives away a customer who's having a bad day.
So the link between the action and the outcome isn't one-to-one.
Not at all. And this inconsistency lets us build these superstitious correlations, like the guy who jumps in the elevator and thinks his jump caused the doors to close. We attribute success to our action, even if the correlation is totally weak.
And then the feedback is also inherently incomplete. This seems like a massive information problem that we can never truly overcome.
It is. It's the tragedy of missing data. We only ever see the outcome of the path we took. We don't get a parallel universe machine to compare it with the paths we missed.
Right.
The person who didn't haggle on the new car purchase will never know if they missed out on a $1,000 better deal. We can't evaluate the impact of what we didn't do, only what we did.
And that makes learning what we should have done incredibly difficult.
Especially in unstructured tasks, like raising a child or leading a team.
And even when we do get feedback, it's rarely clean and simple. It's often just ambiguous.
Exactly. It's so hard to isolate the single cause of success or failure because life is, it's a mix of a million variables.
Yeah.
If you get rejected after a first date, was it the bad joke you told?
Or the haircut.
Or your haircut, yeah. Or was it just that the other person had a miserable day at work and wasn't really ready to date? Too many moving parts just dilute the lesson, and it makes it really easy to blame external factors instead of our own behavior.
And the final sabotage factor feels like the most insidious. Feedback is often hidden or one-sided because people just hate giving bad news.
We are hardwired to transmit good news and conceal or delay bad news to avoid confrontation. And this distortion is rampant in professional settings. A manager might delay a negative review for months, letting small frustrations build up until they finally explode.
Yeah, and then when the feedback finally comes.
When the manager finally delivers it with all this accumulated anger, The employee just sees it as a massive overreaction to one single minor mistake. They don't recognize the long-term pattern of failure that was never addressed. The whole system is just rigged against honest self-appraisal.
So even if we could somehow get perfectly accurate feedback, Dunning shows we have these internal mechanisms to just reject it, specifically through our memory biases.
We do. We use this powerful psychological tool to protect our self-concept, and it's all in how we handle success versus failure. When we get positive feedback, we accept it easily. We describe our successes in stable, abstract terms. I succeeded because I'm naturally creative, or I'm a compassionate person.
But the moment failure shows up.
Oh, we scrutinize it mercilessly,
Yeah.
and we frame it in specific, isolated terms. We say, I failed that test because the room was too loud that one time.
Right, that one time.
Or, and this is Dunning's really powerful, stark example, I slapped someone that one time. By defining our failures as these isolated incidents caused by external factors and our successes as reflections of our stable internal character, well, we succeed in protecting our ego, but we completely fail to learn.
So self-insight is difficult, the roadblocks are everywhere, experience is a flawed teacher. I mean, it sounds kind of impossible. Yeah. But the research does offer ways out of this cognitive maze. What are the practical steps we can actually take?
The initial studies on the dual burden actually offered the most potent solution, and that's the power of training. When they took the low-performing individuals and gave them the skills to evaluate others' performance.
So not just their own.
Not their own. When they were taught the standards of excellence for others, it dramatically improved their metacognitive ability to recognize their own former deficiencies.
So the goal isn't just to practice the task more, but to deeply understand the standards of excellence itself.
That's it, exactly. And secondly, we have to proactively challenge controllability. We have to dismantle our own overoptimism. When you set a goal, you need to actively consider the external factors or skill deficits, not just the lack of effort that could lead to failure.
Like doing a premortem.
That's what Dunning calls it, yeah. Actively simulate the paths of failure. And finally, because our internal monitor is just so fundamentally flawed by self-serving memory, we have to prioritize the outsider perspective.
We have to get out of our own heads.
We must proactively seek and accept impartial external review, especially when the stakes are high. In studies predicting leadership potential or academic success, peers and supervisors are often significantly more accurate predictors of a person's future abilities than the person themselves.
Because our self-concept is too focused on our intentions.
And outsiders just see the consequences. We have to prioritize their view.
Which brings us full circle, all the way back to the ancient mandate, know thyself.
And to Socrates, who said, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Dunning's research suggests that getting to that state of knowing you know nothing is far harder than Socrates might have realized. Our biases actively prevent us from even recognizing our own ignorance.
But the first step is knowing the biases exist.
It is. By understanding why that ignorance persists, the dual burdens, the self-serving biases, the unreliable feedback, that knowledge itself becomes the first and most crucial step in climbing our own personal Everest.
A truly profound and necessary challenge for anyone listening. Thank you for guiding us through this essential material.